Thank you. Well, hello from Switzerland, everybody. We thought it was all going so well, but then a few unexpected things happened. We thought that we really knew what we were up to because teaching live online at IH Zurich-Baden, we've got some experience with blended courses. We've been doing live online lessons for a year, though I have to admit, English courses only, and it was with an in-company client with offices in different cities, and there we had 10 classes and 6 different teachers. But then enter SARS-CoV-2, and within a week, all our school courses, all our in-company courses, all one-to-one courses across 10 different languages had to move online. In addition to this, all the teachers have got their unique teaching styles and also different resources available. As English teachers, I think we are extremely spoiled. Other languages don't have it quite as easy as we have it when it comes to finding online resources, respectively resources with good quality. But from there, what we did is we had one platform. We were really happy with having one platform that was easy or intuitive to use, which needed no registration for participants, so they could remain anonymous. They did not have to register anywhere. It was ideal for language learning. It was independent of any operating system or device, or also the version of the operating system. So what we did is, when the lockdown came in Switzerland, it was business as usual. Our classes went online. We did not reinvent the wheel. We used our course books. We used our supplementary materials and additional external sources, different apps. But then one of the things that we realized was with in-company teaching that many of the apps were actually blocked by IT's departments. Respectively, the online links were not available. So that was the first little hiccup, but trial and error. Okay, once you know something doesn't work, you move on. It's just like the real classroom. Have your plan B up your sleeve. If your photocopier doesn't work, you need to do it in a different way. It was interesting to see what students particularly appreciated about suddenly going online. And this is just a snapshot of my own classes. I asked a total of 72 adult learners, mainly in company courses, of what they particularly liked about the platform that we used. And to be honest, much to my surprise, more than half said they really enjoyed the breakout rooms. And I think one of the reasons behind this is that it replicated the face-to-face classroom that we had before. So it was something that provided stability. They were used to group work and pair work before, and we could continue in exactly the same way online. I think this is something which gave a lot of stability and therefore security to everybody and helped both the teachers and the students to adapt to the online environment. How the teachers adapted to it, it was interesting to see that everybody felt a sense of achievement. It was something new, something different, something most people did not have to handle before. Everybody was on an extremely steep learning curve, both with regards to how do you adapt your lessons online and technology. Suddenly there was a lot of experimenting with word processing. What are the limitations or the opportunities thereof in an online classroom? Teachers found themselves experimenting. Whilst we did use our course books online, we also had to move away from our course books to a large extent. And I think what was particularly nice was how we could actually get to know our students on a different level. Many people worried that teaching online would be extremely impersonal, but it was lovely to see that suddenly there was the student moving away from the camera, and suddenly the head appeared and they actually stuck a cat or a dog into the camera. Or because of the lockdown, people had to work at home. Suddenly there were 3 kids' heads showing up and waving into the camera saying hello to everybody because they wanted to know what their parents were doing. So from this point of view, it was easy for the teachers, despite a few hiccups. How the learners adapted, it was also lovely to see how the learners interacted with us and that they were on an equally steep learning curve, not just from a language learning point of view, but also their expectations. Expectations of online learning, many were worried that they would just sit there and type in their answers, but they would not be able to engage or interact with their colleagues as they normally did. Again, learners were also on an extremely steep learning curve, and the creativity and the group bonding that became evident during those first couple of weeks was rather amazing to see. Suddenly there was much more engagement also on a personal level. Suddenly people were helping each other. So one student was better with tech than somebody else. So the stronger ones helped the weaker ones, just like with language learning. Students started experimenting. Some students were a bit intimidated about being on camera at first. But at the same time, that physical distance of not being in the same classroom helped them to actually speak a bit more freely. There was a lot of laughter, as there usually is, but we never made fun of anybody. Not in a classroom, not online. And what was very interesting to see, particularly with in-company courses, is that suddenly we had increased attendance for some students, not for everybody, but we could see it with some of them. So, all good. What could possibly go wrong? Well, that's exactly where we were a couple of weeks ago. There were things online about security issues with some platforms, having intruders in your classroom that should not have been in your classroom. But the provider of this particular video conferencing platform took measures to avoid the issues or to fix the issues. Also, with the right settings, none of the issues should ever have happened anyway. But several weeks into the lockdown, we were confronted with companies' IT departments. We received a message, and it essentially said that either we use platform X or there were not going to be any more lessons until after the lockdown, and that with immediate effect. We had anticipated technical problems. We had anticipated the challenges of having a learning experience for learners face-to-face, which so much lives on interaction online. But we had not expected that suddenly the tool that we were using to achieve all of this was going to be taken away from us. So what now? Well, the problem is when you've got a multinational company telling you that the video conferencing platform that you're using is banned across their offices worldwide, there isn't a lot you can do, except for adapting and fulfilling the requirements. This has now led to an interesting situation. We do not have any issues with school courses. And people often say I'm a pessimist, so at least not at present. However, with in-company courses, we started with one video conferencing platform, and at present we are using 4 different video conferencing platforms with groups in company. And the video conferencing platform that one company requested is banned at another company. So there does not seem to be a way of having one and the same platform across different companies. If we look at in-company one-to-one clients, where teachers do have freedom of how they want to interact with the students, then we end up with 8 different video conferencing platforms. Now, is this good or bad? Well, I would say that all of these platforms do have their uses, and this is why I've been very careful not to mention a specific product here, but to just be open. Some of these platforms are fairly good, but the problem is they were not designed for language classes. They were designed for a different purpose. And it's a bit like if you want to run a half marathon, then you opt for some good running shoes and not for 8 centimeter high heels. But beggars can't be choosers. We have to deal with what we've got. Some of the challenges that this brings is that the suitability. When you've got a one-to-one student, then you don't need as many features that you would like to see with a group. Because, for example, with a one-to-one student, there is no need for breakout rooms. Groups and one-to-ones do not need the same features, as do small groups and large groups. Fortunately, we tend to have rather small classes, but not only one-to-one students. The video conferencing platform constraints do have an impact on your planning or on your teaching. In our classrooms, we've got a board. So I think any sort of screen sharing is vital to a platform used for learning. If you don't have the screen sharing, then it's almost a bit like going back to the very old days. And I remember doing telephone teaching in the early years of my career, which was you sat in your office and your student would phone in at a given time. So you couldn't really share anything with each other. Fortunately, most of the courses had a book, but suddenly we're confronted with a similar situation. Oops, I can't show you what I can see unless you draw it on a piece of paper and hold that piece of paper into the camera. So there are ways of working around it, but they're not necessarily ideal. Tech support for different platforms. We had a unified product. The different platforms that we need to work with now may have different features based on your operating system. So a Windows user and a Mac user may be able to do different things. In addition to these challenges, we've now been teaching online or only online for 10 weeks. And if we're lucky, then we can go back to normal life in about 2 weeks here. And this is where I think the big problem is. Going into lockdown was fairly easy because it was the same thing for everybody. It was more or less from one day to another, okay, you need to work from home, schools are closed. But coming back is a slightly different matter because there are phased or staggered returns to normal life. In companies, some departments or even entire companies will continue to work from home for longer. One company says that they will go back to normal life end of July. Another one says they will go back to normal life at the end of August. Yet other companies are thinking about having different forms of working where a maximum of 50% will be online in a company. Now, this poses new questions for us teachers. How are we going to handle this? Some participants in school classes may not want to return to face-to-face teaching, at least not at this point. So the question is, how can we teach our classes if some students will have to join remotely, whereas others are with us in the room? So what technical means do we have to teach a class both face-to-face and online simultaneously? What are the limitations of such an approach, both from a pedagogic and a technical point of view? Just think of a class of yours and halve it. And try to imagine half of these people being in the same room with you, but the other half joining the class online from wherever they are. How can you, as a teacher, cope with such a split class in this case and promote learning for every learner? How can you keep the class together as a group? So what effect will this have on group dynamics and on learning? I am afraid that at this point, I do not have the answers for these questions. But I think it is questions that we all have to deal with sooner or later. So, teaching live online, quo vadis? I am sure that we cannot be the only ones in the entire network who are confronted with this problem of how do we now go back to normal life. And it is something, maybe it's worthwhile having a discussion about it from different angles, both from a management or admin point of view, from a technical point of view, but also from a pedagogical point of view. So if anybody would like to join this discussion, you will find me in Switzerland, IH Zurich-Baden. I would be happy to hear your opinions and thoughts about this, and maybe we can find a way of dealing with this together. Thank you very much for your time.
Hi, Coco. That was really good. Very, very interesting. We should be thinking about what to do after all of this, because I think we got comfortable on what to do while we're in lockdown, but we're not thinking about what to do after lockdown. Um, we do have a couple of questions. I don't know if you have some time to reply.
I'm just looking at the questions
Can you
now.
see them? Okay.
Yes, I can. Well, the ones in the Q&A session. Our learners are between 18 and retirement age, all in working life, or most of them in working life. But we are in a fortunate situation in some ways that we don't have young learners. A pity in some ways, but looking at the implications that we've got at the moment.
I
What about
hungry.
breakout rooms? Well, again, here's the question about using breakout rooms for elementary students. I've used breakout rooms with A1s, no problem at all. If you do not have the possibility of using breakout rooms because your software doesn't have it, one of the things is having WhatsApp groups going on. Though then I would set these up differently for every single lesson. On the other hand, I've got students who do not have a smartphone or who do not have WhatsApp. So Facebook groups, Hangouts, just look at what works across the board for all the different types of learners and their devices. Students who don't open their microphones or cameras. Microphones, I have not experienced this one, but some students do not want to be seen on camera. I think it's something that we have to respect, even though it does make it a bit more difficult to find out, are they still with us? Do we have their focus?
Okay, that's
Okay.
great. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. That was a really great talk. So